welcome everyone. My name is Maria Marshall. I am the director of the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. The webinar today, which I'm looking forward to, is a collaborative drought planning using drought scenarios and exercises. And our next webinar, go to the next slide, please.
I'm trying.
Our next webinar will be climbing the IAP2 ladder with Marketing Hometown America. And it's great because both this webinar and the next webinar were funded by NCRC RAD funds. And so it's great to see the great impacts that both of these projects have done and are doing. So with that, let me introduce our speakers for today. We have Dr. Deborah Bathke, who is the Research Associate Professor, Extension and Outreach Coordinator for the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Interim Nebraska State Climatologist. Our co-presenter is Tonya Bernadt, which I just added an R to for no reason, Bernadt, Education and Outreach Specialist, National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And with that, please take it away.
I lost my mouse. There we go. Well, thank you for joining us today. As I just said, we'll be talking about collaborative drought planning using scenario exercises. This is an interactive website complete with worksheets that was created to help individuals, communities, and organizations learn about and plan a drought scenario-based exercise as part of their overall planning and preparedness efforts. So what you can see here is a screen capture of the homepage of the website and the web address. If you have dual monitors and you want to open it up as we go through today's webinar and then go back later and explore in more detail, we welcome you to do that. Tonya will be watching the chat box and we'll have a few questions that we'll ask you at different points during the webinar. But if you have questions of your own, please feel free to enter them in and ask at any time. So this effort started with a research project funded by the National Integrated Drought Information System that was aimed at understanding how drought exercises have been used in various drought planning efforts and how effective they are in meeting different objectives under various levels of resources. A lot of the original exercises that were done were pretty expensive, at least in the academic world. We considered them to be expensive. And our goal in creating this website was to help bring that cost down and make this something that was more accessible to smaller communities or with groups that didn't have quite as many resources. We were fortunate enough to receive funding from 2 grants. From this grant that was sponsored by the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and then also the North Central Region Water Network, that helped us take this research report that was 80 pages and kind of boring and no one wanted to read, and transform it into an interactive guide that included worksheets, case studies, and other resources. We didn't do this alone. We partnered with Extension. And the members of our advisory group are shown here on this website. And then we also continually work with others who use the website to provide updates to it and to add things that, that they might find that would be more useful. So question 1 for the chat box is, how familiar are you with drought-based scenario exercises? So you can just, Tonya, tell them how you want them to do it.
How about if you just want to say very, somewhat, or not at all?
And let me know when you start seeing things coming in.
So far, we have a lot of not at alls, somewhat, not at all.
Well, that's good then that you're part of this webinar today. Yeah. So we can introduce you to the concept and help you learn a little bit more. And Tonya and I are always available to answer questions after the webinar at I wouldn't say we're always available, but we're always willing to. Maybe that's the better wording. So we'll begin by explaining what we mean by drought scenario-based exercises. For our purposes, drought scenario-based exercise are defined as a structured interactive activity that uses a hypothetical drought or the scenario to engage decision makers, stakeholders, agency staff, community members, and others in preparing for and responding to challenges associated with a drought. In the activity shown on this slide, participants had to decide how to deal with a pump failure from one of their main wells during a severe drought. So while this website focuses on drought, exercises like this have been used for multiple hazards, including droughts, floods, water quality, and climate change. So again, here's a screen capture of that homepage. Since our time is limited, we won't be able to cover everything that's included on the website. But if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have questions now as I'm talking, drop them in the chat box and Tonya will let me know. So to start with, the website is broken down into 4 sections, which you can access from the tabs across the top of the page or using the icons that are near the bottom of the page. So these 4 sections are some basics about drought and drought planning, the different types of exercises, the development process, and then also some resources that can help you learn more. So here's a closer view of those 4 main sections and a description of what's included in each. The website is designed so that you can proceed through the site in order or use each section independently. For example, if you're new to planning or using drought scenario-based exercises, you'll likely want to start with a drought planning section and go through the website in order. If you already know the basics, you could start with the process section, or you could even skip directly to the resource section that includes case studies, research findings, a glossary, and worksheets and references. This is where it gets complicated. Each section is broken down into subsections. So for example, that first main heading, drought planning, is broken down into 3 subsections that can help you learn more about drought and its potential effects on your community. And then next is how you can use scenario planning and exercises to increase your community's overall preparedness. So this figure is from the website, and it discusses a key point about drought that makes it so challenging to prepare for. Drought means different things to different people. So how we see or we think about drought depends on where you live, the time of year, and then what your water use and needs are. So given that drought means different things to different people, it's not surprising that scientists have found more than 150 published definitions of drought. To help simplify things when we talk about drought definitions are frequently classified into these 5 areas that you see here. So meteorological drought, agricultural drought, hydrological drought, socioeconomic drought, and ecological drought. Once you're on the website, whoa, I did not expect that. That was a surprise. You can click on these perspectives to learn more. So for example, if you're involved in agriculture, you are most likely have the perspective or concerned with what the effect of rain or snow has on soil moisture deficits, on crop or forage growth. Versus if you're involved in water resources planning, your perspective of drought might come through looking at stream flow levels, lake reservoir levels, and groundwater levels. The next section of the website discusses reasons to prepare for drought. And those reasons have to do with drought's impacts or drought's effects. All living things depend on water. So when drought happens, the effects can be devastating and also far-reaching. In the United States and in Nebraska, where Tonya and I are located, The effects of drought on agriculture are widely publicized. We created this figure on the website to help people see that drought impacts occur across a variety of sectors. And I'll just show one example here, but if you click on any of these, it brings up a list of potential impacts related to that sector. So, for example, human health. Decreased air and water quality can cause respiratory illnesses, skin irritation, gastrointestinal problems, stagnant water. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but during drought, you can have increases in West Nile virus case numbers. And then financial burdens experienced during drought can escalate mental health issues. It's important to note that not all impacts are negative. So with drought, you have winners and losers during drought. So there could be some financial benefits for drought too. Scenario-based exercises offer the opportunity to address and plan for the various types of drought impacts before they happen. They can be used to identify who and what may be affected by drought. They can be used to brainstorm and identify strategies to prepare for or respond to these impacts. And they can be used to weigh the pros and cons of different strategies. The information that you gather from a drought exercise informs different parts of the drought planning process and can help you create an overall drought preparedness plan. That might be a standalone drought plan, or it might be part of a larger emergency management plan. No matter where you are in the drought planning process or the type of plan that you incorporate your drought preparedness and response activities, drought exercises can make a contribution. And all of the figures that I show on the slides are on the website. So, for example, if you click on it, it shows the drought planning process, how we talk about it here at the National Drought Mitigation Center. Most planning processes have a similar, whether it's for drought or something else, have a similar type of process. So if you click on the icons on the website, it'll show you for that particular component how an exercise can contribute. So for your vulnerability assessment, the exercise can help you identify ways in which your community has been affected by past droughts. So you can use an exercise to have people talk about how a potential drought would affect what they do. Are there any questions yet, Tonya?
No, ma'am.
Ma'am. So going back to that home page and looking at the next section, we're going to talk about exercise types next. The exercise types can be found by clicking on the Types tab at the top of the screen. Today and on the website, we focus on discussion-based exercises. So exercises where you sit around a table or in a room and talk about drought, rather than activities like drills, which would simulate the actual movement of people, equipment, and supplies. So a drill, you might be physically moving, taking a water truck and moving water somewhere, or actually making phone calls to practice different sections of a drought plan. Discussion-based exercises can be broken down into 3 types, showing here: workshops, games, and tabletop exercises. In this section of the website, you can explore the types and find case studies as to how they have been used. So workshops, we've all attended workshops. So in general, we know what they are. Workshops bring people together to exchange ideas, discuss points of view, and make suggestions with others about a particular topic or problem. They focus on gathering information, sharing or generating new knowledge, and building products such as a collaborative action plan, a priority list, or draft policies. In the case of drought, the scenario helps link the drought issues and impacts relevant to the community to related drought management systems. The key with the workshop is to focus on the word work, meaning that the participants work together to create a product. And this exercise, I'm trying to remember which this one was. I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been in Scotts Bluff, where they were working on brainstorming kind of out of the box ideas to come up with components of a drought plan for a natural resource district. You'll want to consider a workshop if your objective is to promote learning and gather a list of perspectives that might be relevant to drought in your community. If you're hoping to build consensus or identify strategies and resources, or if you want to write an actual component of your drought plan. So in this example here that we have a case study for, which was conducted in North Platte, we held a workshop where participants were given a drought scenario with impacts that included wildfires, water quality issues, power outages, and more. And participants were asked if ideally, like in an ideal world, how would you respond to this? You know, resources and everything aside. And then the next step of that is what resources do you already have? And then what additional resources do you need? The next type of discussion-based activity is a game. Games use friendly competition with teams as a backdrop for discussing and learning about drought management. Players generally use the context of the scenario to evaluate and select potential drought management strategies. In this instance, we had referees who were serving as experts to give advice to the different teams and also scoring the strategies that they came up with. You'll want to consider using a game if your objective is to create an entertaining environment to learn about managing water resources. If you want to create a risk-free environment so we can talk about drought without having to consider your own operations or your own your community as it exists now. You can also have role playing in games as well. And games are also great for fostering collaboration. So in this example, this is a more higher tech example where participants used interactive web-based tools to select and explore the consequences of strategies that were used to mitigate and respond to drought. They worked under the constraints of budgets, local and state policies and regulations, and then various technical aspects. This was a relatively like the higher end cost of a drought scenario exercise, but we also have low, like the earlier slide I showed, that are low tech based types of games, and also tabletop board games as well related to drought. So, and you can do a hybrid of these types of activities as well. Let's see, why isn't it moving? Next we have, or finally we have tabletop exercises. Tabletop exercises are something you use that if you have a plan in place, generally use if you have a plan in place, and they bring key representatives together from agencies and organizations in an informal, low stress environment to discuss the implementation of an existing drought plan. The photo here is shown from the Hualapai Nation where they walked through their drought plan. We just did one of these last year, and they used this website to help create the scenario and help develop the exercise and evaluate it. Tabletop exercises are great for familiarizing staff with their roles and responsibilities during drought, improving coordination and helping resolve responsibilities among agencies, and discover gaps in resources or staff allocations. So in the ACF, which is the Apalachicola-Chattahoochee-Flint River Basin that goes through Georgia, Alabama, and into parts of Florida, this brought agencies from the 3 states together to talk about what they would implement under different drought conditions, and then the impact that that would have on downstream users. And this was the first time they'd all come together since the Supreme Court made a ruling on water use in their basin. And it was really a positive experience. And we'll be going there again, next month? In about a month and a half, to do another exercise. They've decided to make it an annual event. It can be hard to keep all of these things straight. So on the website, we have a table that compares the different types of exercises to help you see like what's the format of it, who generally attends, how much time does it take. And then we have, I guess it's not here. I'll show that in a minute. I lost track of my slides. But we also have worksheets that can help you work through and select your exercise type too. So once again, we are back to that home screen of the website, and we're moving on to the development process. This is by far the longest section of the website. I don't think we would have time to go through all of it if we had the entire rest of the day. So it has a lot of information. So we're just going to hit on some key points and highlight some things that might be of interest to you. So the website sections, the design and development of a scenario-based exercises has a lot of aspects that you need to consider if you want to make sure that the exercise produces the results and findings and outcomes that you want. To help approach this task, this section breaks down into 5 phases. So the first we call the foundation phase. That's all the work that you need to do really before you start designing your exercise. The next is the planning stage. So that's where you create work teams and plans. The design phase is where you create the products and materials that you will use for your exercise. So if it's a game, it would be where you create the actual materials, the game boards or the role-playing cards, things like that. The implementation has to do with the actual event. And then finally, for those who are in extension, you will really appreciate this, the impact part. How do you assess the exercise? So each of those 5 phases is broken down into a series of steps, complete with examples and worksheets. So for example, the foundation phase, which again is where you lay the groundwork for the exercise, includes the following steps. So we have a needs assessment in there. Arguably, that's the most important. That's the most important step, since it builds the foundation for everything else. It helps you define your problems, establish why you want to conduct an exercise, and identify the challenges and tasks that you will address during the exercise. And again, we have a worksheet. We have a worksheet for everything. It seems like I've spent a lot of time teaching early in my career, so I'm really big on worksheets. And just to note that the worksheets you don't have to go through every single part of it. We intended them to be more of a way to help you think about the kinds of discussions that you need to have as you're developing an exercise. So just like a little subcomponent of that needs assessment would be, what are your community's main drought concerns? So Tonya, over to you.
All right. And I also put the link to the Consider Your Needs worksheet in the chat box for anybody that just wants to check that out. But if you would go ahead and type in the chat box what your main drought concerns are. So it's kind of interesting to see what, how things vary from different places and people. So far we're getting ag-related, crops, livestock, drinking water, absolutely. More ag. Yep, crops and wells, drinking water, drinking water. How to integrate climate deniers into using science to plan. That's really good, Mary. Yeah, so it looks like the majority is ag and drinking water, freshwater lakes.
I think, yeah, that's good to know. Going through some of the resources on the website might help you identify other areas that are impacted by drought. When we gathered information for drought exercise, I think one of the more interesting things, at least that sticks in my mind, that we found was that there were more visits to the local food bank because people didn't have their gardens were failing and not doing as well. So there can be lots of impacts that we don't think about, and our resources can help you identify some of those.
We got a couple more: adaptation and then working in a tribal community. It's all of it, holistically speaking, is what Cynthia was saying.
Exactly. Let's see, where are we now? So we are on assessing your capacity, planning, developing, delivering, evaluating a drought exercise takes a commitment of time and resources. And I think all these years later, Tonya and I've been doing this for 15 years now, right? Which is odd because we're only 20. But we've been doing this for 15 years now, and I think everyone underestimates the resources. I think especially the time commitment that it takes. What do we mean by resources? So obviously there's the money, there's the knowledge and skills, what's the experience, and the expertise of the people who will help you. How much time do they have? You may have people, but do they have time within their workday? And then I think Mary brought this up, the culture and the climate. So something you have to work around is what are the values and the attitudes and the relationships of the people who will be helping you develop the exercise and who will be participating in the exercise. And then also what facility and materials do you have? And if you don't have them, what partnerships can you leverage to help you build that capacity? And again, we have a worksheet to help you think through that and think about what you have available to you, either directly or through leveraging through other projects or things that you might have going on.
Hey, Deb.
Yes.
We do have a question.
Sure.
How do you exercise a slowly evolving issue like drought, or do you focus on the acute impacts?
We've done it both ways. A lot of times it'll be a compressed time frame. So we will cover 5 years of drought in an afternoon. So we do a jump in time through that. Sometimes we'll have a mitigation round where we will have people think about, okay, we're not in drought right now, so it's a great time to plan and think about drought and think about how we want to respond. And then we give them the scenario and talk about how well did your plan or what you thought would work actually work. So a couple of different ways for that. And we're happy to talk about that more with you afterwards or later on too. So after we've kind of laid that foundation for our drought exercise, the next phase is the planning phase. And this is where you create the work teams and the plans to help you keep you on track throughout your whole exercise experience. Really should have had Tonya doing this section because she's the planner, the detailed person. The planning phase includes, this is where after you've considered your needs, so you'll select your exercise type, you'll estimate the costs the cost and your budget for it, you'll get support and buy-in from partners, and you'll identify your working groups. So again, selecting an exercise, there is no single best exercise. Like we can't tell you, you should do this one or you should do that one. Selecting the right exercise is a balance between what you want and what you have. And sometimes people want one thing, but they want it in, like we want to have it next month, and that's not possible. So it's creating a balance between the two, and we've done hybrid approaches and can help talk through that as well. So this was what is this? Is the selecting the exercise type, estimating cost. We have things to think about. Venue rental, is there someplace that's free to you, or do you have to pay someone? Travel expenses, do you need technology? All the different costs like that. And I think even more important than that is who are the people who are actually going to do the work on the exercise? Who's going to deal with the logistics of the exercise? Who's going to develop the survey or the evaluation materials? Who has the expertise to develop a scenario? And we'll talk about what that entails in a little bit. And is there someone who's experienced in facilitation that can handle that part of it? Again, the website's interactive, so if you click on a section, it'll give you examples. So I forgot which one this was. So the scenario, I think it was. So gather background information, design the narrative events and the technical details and things like that. So we tried to make everything as interactive as possible. The third phase of the exercise development process is the design phase. So this is where you create the products and materials for the exercise. And one of these is the actual scenario. And a drought scenario can be something as simple as just a script that says, we're in drought, we're in extreme drought according to the US Drought Monitor. And these are some of the impacts that we're seeing. Your scenario can be that simple, or it can involve like hydrologic modeling of stream flow or climate change modeling. And you can use computer-based displays and animations to show this. Or you can do something that's kind of in between. And I think this is where Tonya and I typically fall when we work with communities. The balance between the really expensive and the not very much detail is using diagrams or a storyboard or something like that to help tell the story of drought. I don't have any shown here, but there are some examples of each of these on the website, so you can see what they look like. And if you don't find something you're looking for, we do have some more examples that from more recent exercises that we need to put into the website to make available to folks. Here's an example of the worksheet to kind of help step you through the process of things to think about as you're designing your scenario. I think one of the feedback we got was to make these rather than just print out that you could actually type into. And I can't remember if those are up yet or not. The fourth phase, and we're going to hit on these really quickly just because of time, is the implementation phase. This is where you plan for the actual event itself. So these are the things you do before the exercise, when you deliver the exercise, and then as your follow-up. So in this implementation phase, it would be, maybe I have an example of it. I do not have an example of it. Tonya, remind me what's in this. This would be the facilitation activities that you use. Is that what's in this section? the delivery. So pre-event preparations would
Yeah.
be your registration, would be checking with the facility to make sure that, you know, how you want your tables laid out,
Finalizing logistics,
creating handouts and things like that.
preparing the space, setting the tones. Sometimes we have guidelines, you know.
Things like that. So
And the worksheets, sorry, I was slow listening to you, but the worksheets are now clickable and you can fill them in online. So
okay.
we did get that done. I had to go check. I was like, I don't think we did that, but it is done.
I remember that was a recommendation from someone
Yep.
who used the website, but I couldn't remember if we actually got to it.
We did.
And then finally, the impact phase, it's where you conduct your evaluation of the exercise. So you may have a survey, you may have interviews, you have your development team do a debrief, you identify lessons learned. Sometimes, like in the FEMA or Homeland Security, they call it a hot wash, and where you plan your next steps and then you summarize and you share your findings. And we always like to be part of that process, or at least get the findings so that we can use it to enhance this website. So after hearing about this, what type of exercise would you be interested in learning more about, or do you think would work well for your community or the people that you work with?
So I am just typing in workshop game, tabletop exercise, or combination are kind of the main answers.
Mhm.
I can't spell combination.
So I guess the question I have for you, Tonya, Deborah is, and Tonya, this is Mary, is,
Hi, Mary.
have you been able to use this with young people? And how has that worked if you?
We haven't, well, we have some, I should let Tonya answer this, because you've done some activities with youth, water
Yep.
banking, and
Yep. So we haven't used this specifically, but we've used other games that we've created for youth. So we have a water banking game where the kids get, and it's funny, I have the cards right here, like kids each get a role, you know, like you're an environmentalist, you're a water manager, you're an emergency responder, and we give them beads like what you use in your fish tank maybe. And let's say like in Lincoln, we get on average 24 inches of rain a year. So we give them 24 beads and say, you have plenty of rain this year. Here's your 24 beads. How would you allocate this into different sectors? And then we go through a drought scenario and say it's turned for the worse. The drought monitor said this. This is what's happening with rain. And we take half of those beads away. And then we say, okay, now you're in a drought. You have half the water. What would you do with that? And so the kids have to put themselves in the role they receive. And then they all work together to come up with how they would share that water. And in a perfect world, we'd just share the water and all get along, right? But for the kids' sakes, we hope that they'll do it that way. We also have a couple other games that we've done, and one of them is water, you thinking about drought, and that's one that our students created, and they did that in Alaska. And then we have the one that Deb showed before when they were talking about was it a pipe
yeah,
main break or something, and that's ready for drought, the drought game. And those, I can put those links to those two.
they're on the website too.
Yeah, they're on our website, so I can put those in the chat box.
At least the ready for drought. I think the other one's been added because that was
Okay.
And we have done, so with the small kids, we've done a drought tournament activity with college students before, and we did the drought game one is that what it's called? The Ready for Drought game. We did that with some students in the Fine Arts and Graphic Design program. I think they were sophomore, juniors, as a lead in to help them learn about drought before they did some design projects and infographic type of work based around drought and climate. So. Did you get any responses?
Yeah,
Or are there other
did.
questions?
I got a couple. So tabletop or game, workshop or tabletop, and then games for farmers to simulate future conditions for irrigation planning. That's cool. I never thought of that.
We have been looking into, maybe it's someone from the group from another project that I'm on. We have been looking into different games specific to farming and kind of throughout the whole production to market cycle, and how to adapt how to create and adapt a type of game specific to that sector community. So that's something that we are working on. And we can keep you posted on that. Unless you're someone from that project and you already know about it. Anything else? If not,
That's all I see in the chat box.
I also want to point out that we have a wealth of resources on this site. So if you go to that resources section, we have a past events section that shows locations of some of the scenario-based exercises. We have case studies like the ones that I had up throughout the website. Every time we are involved in an exercise, we try and create a case study that gives some basic information about it. We also have a form where those, if they didn't work with us directly on an exercise, that they can submit their own case study. Since this is for the funders out there, so we've had, in the number of years that this website's been live, what, 2 years now, maybe? 2 full years at most.
Yeah.
We've had probably 2,000 individuals per year use the website and have downloaded lots of resources from it. We know of at least a dozen exercises that have been created using these resources and have led to the development of drought plans. And you know what? I just looked at my next slide, which is my our email, and because I'm actually Bathke 2, not Bathke 1. So I guess I was feeling number 1, right? So Tonya, if you want to put that in the chat box.
I will again. I did put it in once, but I'll put it in again.
So we want to take this time to thank you for, spending your lunch hour with us and taking an interest in the work that we've done. We hope that we gave you enough of a taste to get some good ideas and takeaways that you can use. And we are always happy to talk with you, to answer questions. If you're thinking about holding a drought scenario exercise, Tonya and I are used to, working on the lower end of the price point spectrum and being creative with ways to leverage opportunities and resources. So, or to adapt things that we've already done to meet someone else's needs. So, and I think that's all.
Cynthia did have a question. Are there any game scenarios for wells and springs, such as surface water bodies impacts? And I'm not aware of any specifically.
We have some discussion questions that we have used in various exercises. One of our goals that this webinar made us get back around to thinking about again is we have plans to create a question bank of evaluation questions that have been asked after previous exercises, and also a question bank of discussion questions. So I think the thing we had a couple of questions or challenges related to surface water and wells in the Ready for Drought the Drought game. And I know we did, and those you can find online, but we've also had some other ones and some of these other events that we've done that they may not be online, but I can always get those to you, just probably not this week. But please feel free to reach out to me if you want some more information on the ways that that's been addressed in other exercises. Anything else?
Right, Tonya, this is Maria. How do you get people to think about drought in and of itself, right? So I might be raining today, but that doesn't mean that we're not in a drought or a drought can happen. So how do you get people to even think about it, to even want to do this?
I think what I've found is that that's really hard to do. People get a little complacent, that it might be dry for a season, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool, it's raining again. After we work all over the nation, actually have worked all over the world. And I think what it takes sometimes is a big event, and for people to actually feel impacts, to think ahead. Some places are proactive, but I feel like a lot of places it takes that big event for them to really say, oh, we really need to be prepared next time.
And the thing to add to that is a local champion for it.
Yes.
So the event alone isn't often enough. Sometimes you need to have someone who's really pushing and willing to work on it and to help make it a priority for an area. Right. And this doesn't have to be for our whole community. You can have an event like this that's focused. We did one, and the last one we did before COVID was focused on the animal confinement operations in Northwest Iowa. So it was focused on a particular topic like that, or it can be focused on a particular group of people. So it doesn't have, we use community, but we use it loosely. Like a community can be a group of producers, or a community can be what you think of as a town in the surrounding rural area, or the community in the case of the ACF River Basin, where the stakeholders of the stakeholder group of the river basin. So
we did have another question. Does data trend details for ground truthing help them see the value of a drought exercise?
Say that again.
Does data trend details for ground truthing help them see the value of a drought exercise?
Probably.
And there's been times that we don't use the actual historical data, depending on what we're doing, what they want us to do. We've actually made it a really, really, really bad drought that they have never experienced before. So that people are thinking into the future, like, ooh, this really could happen, and we really need to think about this. So sometimes we use the historical, but we sandwich something really bad in the middle of it.
Or we extend it, or we combine the most intense drought with the longest drought.
Yep.
We've done that. We did that in the Caribbean.
Yep.
Did some statistical manipulation to do that type of thing. So I'm not a modeler, so I don't do modeling, but we have worked with groups who've done hydrologic modeling and things like that too. So
any more questions? If not, thank you, Deborah and Tonya. This was super interesting. And we do make the slides available when we send out the YouTube video to everybody. So if you have a link to you'll get a link to the video with the slides. And so, yes, we thank you guys. This was so interesting. And that website looks like it has tons of information, exercise and worksheets. So this was wonderful.
Thank you for supporting us.
Yes,
Of
and if you're
course.
going through the website, like we've been through it a million times, and just today I found something that I was like, oh, we need to fix that.
Mhm.
So if you do find something that needs fixed or isn't particularly user-friendly or doesn't make sense, please let us know, because we are continually working on updating it and trying to increase its usability and usefulness. So
Well, for the NCRCRD, this is a great bang for our buck. That's for
Awesome.
sure.
Great.
and if you need any of those numbers, like web numbers and things for your reporting, I'm happy to get those to you.
Well, I'm sure we'll be contacting you.
Okay.
So everyone, our next webinar is April 29th from 3 to 4, and it's the IAP2 ladder with Marketing Hometown America. Forward to seeing all of you next month. Thank you.